Panchayati Raj. It's a concept we hear about all the time, right? The whole idea is to bring democracy right down to the village level. But the heart of it all is Article 243, a part of the Constitution so detailed it runs from the letter A all the way to O. So today, let's crack this code together.
Now, let's be honest. For a lot of people, especially students prepping for exams, staring at Articles 243A through 243O can feel, well, like you're looking at a maze. Trying to remember if C is composition or D is duration is a real headache. It's basically a constitutional alphabet soup. So, how do we fix this? Well, in this explainer, we're going to ditch the rote memorization. Instead, we're going to turn this complicated legal text into a really simple, logical story. We're going to follow the journey of building a local government from the ground up, using one simple keyword for every single letter, from A to O. Trust me, it's going to make a whole lot more sense. All right, every good story needs a solid beginning, and the story of a panchayat starts with its foundation. The first three articles, A, B, and C, are all about laying that essential groundwork. Let's see how it's done. It all has to start with the people, right? So our very first keyword is A, for assembly. Article 243A defines something called the Gram Sabha. And what is that? It's literally an assembly of every single registered voter in the village. This is the bedrock of democracy at the local level. You can think of it as the village's own parliament. Okay, and this slide here clears up a really common point of confusion. The Gram Sabha is not the same thing as the Gram Panchayat. The Sabha, remember, is everybody, all the voters. It's the village parliament. The Panchayat, on the other hand, is the small group of people they elect to handle the day-to-day work. So think of them as the village cabinet. So, once you have your assembly of people, what's the next logical step? Well, you've got to actually build the institution that's going to govern. And that brings us to our next keyword, B for build. Article 243B says you must build or constitute these panchayats at 3 levels: village, intermediate or block, and district. Okay, so we've decided to build a panchayat. But what's it going to look like? How many people will be in it? How are they chosen? That's where C for construction comes in. Think of this article as the architect's blueprint. It spells out the exact composition, the structure, and the election process for the panchayat. All right, we've got the skeleton, the basic structure. Now it's time to give it a soul. The next set of articles, D, E, and F, are all about embedding core democratic principles into this structure. We're talking inclusion, stability, and accountability. And this brings us to an absolutely crucial point, Article 243D. Our keyword here is D for diversity. This is the article that mandates reservation of seats for scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, and for women. It's about ensuring that everyone, especially those who've been historically left out, has a guaranteed seat at the table. Now, I've seen some old study tricks that try to link D to the word daya, which means pity or charity. And let me tell you, that could not be more wrong. This slide says it perfectly. This isn't charity. Reservation is a constitutional right designed for empowerment and to make sure our local governments actually reflect the people they serve. All right, let's quickly cover the next 2 logical rules. First up, E for year. This one's pretty easy to remember. Article 243E sets a fixed 5-year term, or karyakal, for the panchayat, which gives it stability. And then, what if a member isn't fit for the job? Well, that's F for fail. Article 243F outlines the specific conditions under which a member can be disqualified. Okay, so we have a well-structured, inclusive body with clear rules. But what can it actually do? And how does it pay for things? These next 4 articles, G through J, are where we get to the real meat and potatoes, power and money. This is all about empowerment. Our keyword is G for genius. The idea is, to make a panchayat a truly effective or genius institution, you have to give it real power and authority. And that's what Article 243G does. It links the panchayat's work to 29 specific subjects listed in the Constitution. We're talking real-world stuff like drinking water, local roads, and primary health care. You know, power without money is pretty much useless. So this slide breaks down the financial side of things beautifully. First, H is for tax. Simple. Article 243H gives panchayats the power to levy their own local taxes. Second, I is for income. This sets up a state finance commission to make sure the panchayats get a fair share of the state's income. And finally, J is for janch, a Hindi word for audit, because with money comes responsibility. You got to be able to check the books for transparency. We're in the home stretch now. We've built the Panchayat, we've given it principles, power, and a purse. Now, for the final section, we need to look at the machinery that makes this whole system run, the elections and all the legal bits and pieces.
All right, get ready for my absolute favorite mnemonic of the day.
How on earth do you remember Article 243K?
Think cricket. Kings 11. What does 11 start with? The letter E. And E is for election. I know it's a little quirky, but it works every time. Article 243K mandates an independent state election commission to make sure all Panchayat elections are free and fair. Next up, we've got a pair that just makes sense together. L stands for lagao, a Hindi word that means to apply. So Article 243L applies all these Panchayati Raj laws to union territories. And its counterpart, M, for mana, which means to prohibit. Article 243M creates important exceptions, saying these laws might not apply or will apply differently in certain tribal areas to protect their unique customs. One applies, the other creates an exception. See? Logical. And we wrap it all up with the last two legal safeguards. N is for Nirantar, which means continuity. This was basically a transition rule. It said that the old local laws could continue for 1 year just to make sure there wasn't a legal vacuum. And finally, O is for objection. This is a big one. It bars courts from interfering in the middle of an electoral process, which prevents elections from getting stuck in endless legal battles. And just like that, we've done it. We've journeyed all the way from A to O. We didn't just memorize a list of articles, we actually told the story of how a local government is imagined, built, empowered, and kept running. Let's do one final, super quick recap to lock it all in. So here it is, the whole story on one screen. We started with the assembly of the people. Then we decided to build the institution and defined its construction. We ensured diversity, set its term in years, and made rules for members who might fail. We made it a genius body with real powers, gave it the ability to tax and receive income, and made sure there was an audit or janch. Our King's 11 trick reminded us of elections. We saw where the laws applied or lagu, and where to prohibit it or mana. And we finished with continuity and a bar on objections. A logical story, not just a random list of letters. So we end with this thought. The constitutional promise on paper, it's honestly brilliant. It creates a powerful third tier of government. But is that what's actually happening on the ground? While Article 243 gives them all this power, why do most panchayats today still find themselves completely dependent on state governments for both funds and functions? The law is there, but closing that gap between the promise and the reality, well, that's the challenge that still remains.